Hey, everybody. So, a few days ago, I did a TikTok video on Tennessee State Representative Aftyn Behn. She's the state representative for District 51 in Tennessee, and she is currently running in the special election for District 7 of the United States House of Representatives. That was the seat vacated by Mark Green. Today, I had the privilege of sitting down with Representative Behn over a Zoom call to discuss some of her policies. Representative Behn has really fought for the people of Tennessee. Her campaign message is simple: feed kids, fix roads, fund hospitals. She has bold ideas, and she's not afraid to think outside the box to come up with creative solutions to help Tennesseans, as you will see in the interview. I apologize in advance for the video quality of the interview. It was a Zoom call, and it was the best I could do at the time. But I do hope you enjoy it, and I'll talk to you guys later.
The first thing I wanted to talk about is the main slogan on your website, the feed kids, fix roads, fund hospitals. What's the story that what's the story behind that? Where'd you come up with that? Kind of tell me a little bit about yourself and kind of go from there.
Yeah, so I'm from East Tennessee and was working abroad when Trump was elected the first time and decided to move
Mhm.
back. And I remember telling my parents I wanted to get involved in Tennessee politics. And my mom started crying so hard we had to leave the restaurant. And that was 8 years ago. And I have been a community organizer ever since then. I was a social worker before that, been a community organizer. And then in 2023, I decided to run for the state house. And so I've been in the Tennessee House of Representatives for 2 years and organized around a lot of my legislation there, which is ending the grocery tax by closing corporate loopholes, establishing a universal pre-K program that can reach all 95 counties by taxing big tech. The core tenet of my legislative portfolio has been corporate accountability. Feed kids, fix roads, and fund hospitals is kind of the next iteration of that. So, feed kids, Governor Lee declined hundreds of millions of dollars to feed kids across 95 counties. And the way he was able to do that was through a loophole at the federal level. So, as your next congresswoman, I hope to close that loophole so that kids will be fed across the state. Fix roads. I don't know where you live, but I live in Nashville. The roads have been paved, but they're paved probably every 15 years. And really, it's a call to start investing in public infrastructure in a way that's not passing the buck. Right now, we have a $73 billion infrastructure backlog in the state, and there's not enough money to address that backlog nor plan for the future. And then funding hospitals, my first job when I moved back was as a community organizer defending Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act from the 2017 proposed cuts. Feels like Groundhog Day because of what's happened since then. And so saving Medicaid and saving rural hospitals and public hospitals has always kind of been the focal point of my organizing career. And so those three together, and it's really just about public infrastructure and actually doing something. We need a Democratic Party that actually does something.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm from Memphis, and the potholes in Memphis are legendary. Those things would swallow a Humvee. They're crazy there. So yeah, I definitely when I saw that, especially it kind of leads me into the first question I was going to ask you about is the pots or for potholes act or the pot for potholes act, and I realized that didn't make it through, but I thought that was a brilliant idea, especially to try to get marijuana legalized in Tennessee, and then to use the revenue for something that Tennessee needs desperately, which is better infrastructure and roads. And so, how did you come up with that? And like, what was the impetus there?
Yeah, it actually, I can't take full credit. Governor Gretchen Whitmer had proposed an iteration of that. But so yeah, we proposed it, Senator Heidi Campbell and I, and it's been a wonderful organizing vehicle. And I think those of you who don't know, the Tennessee legislature, they're not interested in diversifying our revenue streams. And so a lot of my legislation is tethered to creating new revenue streams that aren't just giving tax breaks to billionaires and corporations and passing those tax breaks and cuts onto working class Tennesseans. And it was really funny because I was out in Dixon at an event, and this asphalt layer looked at me. He goes, "Are you the pot for potholes lady?" And so I was so tickled that someone out in the ether, and he was asking me pretty substantive questions about the bill. And so I was deeply impressed, and it really penetrated the psyche. There was also a marquee at a landscaping company in Clarksville that read legalized pothole repairs as the bill was making its way through the legislature. So I was very grateful for the outpouring of support we had across the state. And as I said, this campaign is building upon that.
One of the things that I really liked about the proposed bill, and I know it stalled in subcommittee and everything, but one of the things I really liked about it is that it worked to, expunge the records for nonviolent offenders, for marijuana convictions and everything, which I thought was really, really great. Hopefully, it would be something that could be maybe revisited down the road because given that so many other states, like where I live right now in North Mississippi, they use a lot of the revenue or they try to for things. And given just the fact that it's widely used across the country, I think that would be a great idea for that. The other thing I kind of wanted to touch on is another act or another idea was your homes not hedge funds act. So tell me a little bit about that exactly.
Yeah, so I believe private equity has bought almost 40% of the single family houses in Davidson County. I
Oh
hope
wow.
someone will corroborate that. But I mean, it's an exorbitant number, and that's just in Davidson County. That's not across the state, and I'm sure it's rampant elsewhere. So this bill would have prevented private equity from buying single family homes across the state. We have, and private equity right now is a parasite across Tennessee. They
Uh-huh.
own a majority of shares of the nursing home industry, daycares, ABA facilities. And so we really need to see, especially in Congress and at the state legislature, we need to see more protections and limitations around private equity buying up industries and monopolizing them and passing, making it harder for consumers to enter that market.
Yeah. No, I mean, I completely agree. I think that's definitely one of the reasons that the rental home prices, to rent a house, the price for that has gone, through the roof. And a couple of follow-ups to that, I noticed that I think you had there in the bill, it was like if you owned 100 homes or less, you could still, do that, I guess. You weren't going to be affected. But if it was more than 100 homes, like what was the reasoning for the 100 home like limit or kind of whatever you want to call it, the cutoff, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, there are Tennesseans that have, they are kind of, they would say mom and pop companies that own a lot of these houses. And so doing the research across the country and from other states, it seemed to be the threshold that was generic and universal across the other states that have tried to file this legislation.
Okay. And then I know a lot of companies they kind of hide behind like LLCs and everything like
Yeah.
that. What do you think? What is there to prevent that kind of thing from happening and from companies from dodging that 100 house rule by using an LLC or like a shell corporation or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously this bill, I'm sure if it passed, there'd be some work to be done around it. But I think the piece you surfaced is important to discuss. A lot of these companies, multinational companies, have subsidiaries in the form of LLCs. And a great example of this is the franchise tax refund. So your legislature, not us, or your Republican supermajority, gave just hand delivered over $1 billion, and it'll probably reach 2 billion of your tax dollars to the largest companies in the world. And
Mhm.
FedEx, for example, which has multiple subsidiaries, multiple LLCs, filed 13 times for this tax refund, and we don't know how much money they collectively accumulated through it. So it is an issue, and this is something that I think around, my core pet issue, which is corporate accountability, is what I'd like to see in my legislation is making sure that the subsidiaries are recognized and that they're also not dodging loopholes as well.
Okay. And I know is this still is the bill still in subcommittee or is it made it out of subcommittee yet? Or
Yeah, I don't think I think we wanted to wait until next year to present it. So hopefully, well, I don't know. Everything's fluid with this congressional race. So we'll see if I'm there next year, but it is in a holding pattern.
Gotcha. Okay. Again, I think that's a great idea just to help regular families in Tennessee and then, who knows, it could be adopted if in other states because I just think it's a fantastic idea. So hopefully it progresses and makes it to law. But so going on talking about like your potential district with District 7 in Tennessee, it's a pretty big district. I think it's got 500 and some odd thousand registered voters there. And it stretches from Williamson County to Clarksville, Nashville, Davidson County and everything. What what do you think is the biggest issue for the voters in your district? Like what's the most important thing? Just the top one, maybe or top two, if you will.
Affordability and safety.
Okay. And so what do you think, how do you think your ideas can help those issues for those constituents?
Yeah, I mean, affordability, one of the reasons I decided to run, I'm a millennial and life feels utterly unaffordable right now for me. I can't afford to buy a house. I can't afford to start a family. And my story is, it's reflective of a large part of the younger generation, especially in Tennessee. So affordability is a key tenet. I think cheaper groceries, cheaper utilities, um, it's just an issue of affordability. That's what I'm hearing again and again. And then safety. I think a lot of communities across the state feel unsafe. I've had to say goodbye to at least 12 families that have left my district to move out of state because they don't feel safe raising their kids here. And it's interesting because I feel like the Republicans have co-opted safety to mean that there's, tons of crime in our urban cores, and that's why we need to send in the National Guard. And it's like, no, it's actually your policies that are making us really unsafe by,
Exactly.
for example, inhibiting municipalities from passing gun reform laws at the local level because we have terrible state preemption, giving out, your tax dollars in the form of corporate tax breaks and not investing that back into public infrastructure in our city. So it's really, they've co-opted safety. And I think this race is one where we can reclaim that narrative and push back against it.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think, especially in an area, say, for example, like Memphis, since the president was just wanting to sending National Guard and all these agencies to Memphis to help with crime, the the cause of crime in Memphis and I'm sure in many other areas is multifactorial. There's so many different contributing factors, be it education, obviously poverty is a huge contributing factor, and I feel like unless you actually uh, address those issues individually or as a whole, or at least in some way, the crime is going to continue regardless
Yeah.
of whether or not you just arrest people off the streets. That's I mean, I'm all for reducing crime, especially in Memphis. I know Memphis is historically a high crime area, but I think there's so much more um, that needs to be addressed, including things like systemic racism and things like that. Um, so yeah, I I definitely agree with you that there's a lot to be done there. Another thing that's come up so much that you spoke about was rural hospitals, and rural hospital closure, especially with the latest budget bill that passed nationally. So what is something that you've been trying to do or want to do that's going to help that in Tennessee to help prevent rural hospital closure and help improve healthcare costs in general for your district?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, a lot of the damage has been done with this big, ugly bill, coupled with the federal funding cuts to our state Medicaid program, which could
Mhm.
reach around 2 billion. So the effects and the consequences are here and they will be exacerbated. I think what can ameliorate the situation, there's legislation right now at the federal level, the Save Rural Hospitals or Save Medicaid Act, which would restore hopefully some of the cuts to Medicaid that the big ugly bill passed and codified and will go into effect next November. But unfortunately, this is a time where we have to start thinking big. We have to start thinking about transformative change, because the pendulum's going to swing towards our side, and we have to be ready to govern, and we have to be ready with a plan as to how to restore all of the um, I guess, address all of the issues that have been caused and perpetuated by this administration.
That's absolutely right. I think there's so many things going on at one time. It's kind of hard to pinpoint any one thing. Funding is obviously something, and then getting paid so doctors actually want to come to those areas and work in those rural hospitals and clinics. I manage a medical practice, and we're very small, and we rely on Medicaid. So I definitely know losing that funding it's very very detrimental to those type of community hospitals and medical clinics. Um, so I know you're busy. I'm not trying to keep you, but I one of the things I also thought that you makes you set you apart is one, you're the only female running, right, in this race, correct? And you're very a huge proponent of women's reproductive rights and autonomy and everything like that. If you can you just go into that just a little bit for me, just to kind of tell me kind of what you believe and where you stand on everything.
Yeah, so in the legislature, I've carried what we call the North Star Bill, which is the vision we want to see in Tennessee as it relates to reproductive freedom and our healthcare. It repeals 19 laws that we have on record, which tells you how bad things are for those that are reproductive age in this state. And last year, I filed a lawsuit. There was a bill that would have prevented minors from traveling across state lines to receive the healthcare they need. And I filed a lawsuit against the state of Tennessee because what the Republican supermajority was trying to leverage this legislation for was to test as to your First Amendment right to speak about issues that they find contentious. And I filed a
Yes.
lawsuit to preserve your First Amendment right. We actually won in a conservative Sixth Circuit with a Bush
That's
appointed
amazing.
judge. And it enabled Tennesseans to continue to talk about issues that the Republican supermajority deems sensitive or controversial. So I do have a track record on this issue. I have spent 8 years with the groups that have been fighting to restore reproductive and a bodily autonomy in this state, and I hope to carry that to Congress.
That's one of the things I definitely think sets you apart, obviously, is that you're not afraid to kind of like get in there and mix it up and do what you need to do to fight for women's rights, which, is desperately needed in the landscape that we're at right now. And so I definitely I support you 1,000,000% on that. Um, so what when you're elected and you get to Washington, what is your kind of day one plan? What when you hit the ground running, what's the first thing you kind of want to do?
Probably propose two messaging bills, one around ending the grocery tax so I can carry that work with me to Congress. And second is to address the crisis that our farmers are experiencing in the district, to propose probably a farmer bill of rights, obviously coupled with some short-term stabilization package that I can work with Republicans on. But the farmers bill of rights, which would be, once again, the North Star, the vision for what farmers should have at their fingertips. And I think right now is a time where I hope a lot of people will be waking up to the fact that they have been scammed by this administration. Things are not getting more affordable. Things are not getting better for folks, and especially farmers who are having to deal with Trump's tariffs and the backlash from that.
Mhm.
So I hope to file a farmer bill of rights and organize around it, hold town halls across the district, and then obviously run for reelection in 2026.
That's great. Well, Representative Behn, I truly appreciate your time today. And so the primary election is what date again?
It's next Tuesday. We have 6 days.
Okay. And then the main election is what?
The December 2nd.
December 2nd. Okay. So everybody needs to get out there and they need to vote for Aftyn Behn.
Thank
She
you.
is the candidate to vote for. She's going
Thank
to
you.
help. She's here for Tennesseans. She's here, I think, for everybody. And she's not afraid to really get down and mix it up when it needs to happen. So thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. And I wish you all the best. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. Bye.
The primary for the special election is next Tuesday, October 7th, with the main election coming on Tuesday, December 2nd. So, everybody, share this video, get the word out there that Aftyn Behn is the candidate that Tennessee Democrats need to rally behind so we can flip this seat in Congress and keep this administration in check. Remember, Aftyn Behn, District 7 special election. You guys get out there, vote, like this video, subscribe to the channel, share this video, and I will talk to you later.